Greetings, church family. I'm here in my home office. Behind me is an original stained glass window from the sanctuary of Earl Street Baptist Church, which was constructed and dedicated in 1923, almost a century ago now. Even when I am not at the church, here when I am at home, this window serves as a constant and vivid reminder to me of what a rich heritage our church has, and that we are custodians of that heritage. Who could have guessed 100 years ago what God would have in store for this church family, and how God would use this church family to spread the gospel and to be a witness in our community and throughout the world? And who could have guessed even 2 months ago now that our church would be facing the kind of challenge and crisis that we are facing together? In recent days, we have all been hearing the debate and discussion about when and how to reopen our economy. And of course, we have been paying particular attention to the corresponding conversations about when and how churches should reopen. In fact, as recently as today, our governor announced that public schools in our state will not reopen until the fall. Still, there are those who believe we should reopen our church immediately and without restriction, and others who believe we should continue to suspend our in-person gatherings indefinitely. Between those two views is a whole range of options that include a phased-in kind of approach, based on guidance that we receive from medical experts and governmental authorities. And all of those viewpoints are represented by people in our church who love our church and want what's best for our church. But because our church members have such a wide range of viewpoints, it has become apparent to me that not everyone in our church will agree with whatever decision we make about when and how to reopen our church. But of course, that is what makes our church strong. Members of our church family have always had divergent viewpoints on a lot of issues. Just like any other healthy family, we have learned through the years how to manage our differences while still maintaining our unity, and our church does a beautiful job of that. We have learned how to disagree without being disagreeable. We have learned how to be respectful of people who see the world differently than we do. And all of that is because we agree on what matters the most: God's grace in Jesus Christ and our faith in Him. At Earl Street, we are determined to keep our focus on Jesus, who taught us and showed us how to live a greater way. When we do begin gathering, whenever and however that happens, some of us will be so glad to see each other that we are going to want to immediately shake hands and embrace each other warmly and enthusiastically. Others of us will be just as glad to see each other, but will want to remain socially distant. We all want to be together again in person, and I assure you no one wants that more than I do. But how we go about doing that will require a great deal of mutual sensitivity and respect. And many of us are preparing for a new reality whenever and however we reopen our church. As we prepare for that time, our ministers have been participating in webinars and other training conferences led by people who represent a wide spectrum of denominations, congregation sizes, and worship styles, trying to learn as much as we can from other churches about how to handle such issues as choirs, communion, baptism, collecting the offering, greeting one another, small group in-person gatherings, sanctuary and overflow capacity, parking, preschool and children's gatherings, facility sanitation and sterilization, weddings, funerals, coffee stations, Wednesday evening meals and activities, greeters, replacing volunteers who no longer feel comfortable fulfilling their responsibilities, Sunday school curriculum, budget adjustments and reallocations, and even shifting staff responsibilities. The ripple effects of all of this are staggering. And what makes these issues even more complicated is that there are no best practices out there, since churches have never had to deal with anything like this before. There are only emerging practices that churches are trying for the very first time. The learning curve is steep, especially for those of us who have been doing church the same way for a long time. So we are doing our best to gather as much information as we can from some of the most well-respected leaders in church life. And yet, when it comes right down to it, no one knows what is best for our particular church better than the servants you have chosen to lead our congregation. The reopening of churches in our country or even in our state will not be a one-size-fits-all process. We will receive guidance from the medical experts and from the governmental authorities. We will consult with widely respected church leaders about how they are leading their congregations through these unprecedented times. But at the local church level, when our particular church makes our decisions, we will be relying on the 18 deacons elected directly by our congregation, as well as our 6 staff ministers. And while our decisions are guaranteed not to please everyone, we are appealing to you for your prayers, trust, and cooperation as we move through these unusual times. Over the past 18 years, since I have been at Earl Street, we have developed a relationship of trust. When our congregation has made difficult decisions and I was not sure what we should do, I trusted this church to make wise and timely decisions, and you have never disappointed me. But in the same way, there have been times when our congregation has had to trust our leaders. You may not have always agreed with us, but I hope you have always been able to trust that we love our church and we will always do what we believe is best for this family of faith. I also hope you know us well enough by now to know that we are determined not to politicize these conversations, but to make prayerful decisions that we believe will honor God and protect the unity of our congregation and the effectiveness of our church's missions and ministries. So I'm asking you now to be patient and prayerful as we make these agonizing decisions and as we move into an uncertain future that God has in store for us. Please pray for our ministers and for our deacons as we make decisions that will glorify God, strengthen our witness, build up the body of Christ, and enable us to live the greater way with more vitality than ever before. And above all, trust God to work in all of this for God's glory and for our good. As I said when this all began, and as I said it many times, life is hard, but God is faithful. And there is no congregation on earth with whom I would rather be on this journey than you. I love you and miss you and long for the day when we can all be together again.